All righty. Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Kwiatkowski. I am a marketing manager here at eLearning and the game agency. eLearning, formerly known as eLearning Brothers, for those of you who may not know. And today we are going to take a course from PowerPoint to story-driven e-learning. But first, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will email a link to the recording to everyone who registered. Closed captions are enabled for this webinar, and you can show or hide them using the captions button in your toolbar on the bottom of the Zoom window. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A panel as you need it, and we'll get as many of these as we can at the end. And if we can't get to your question, we'll do our best to continue the conversation offline afterwards. And you can also live chat with other attendees using the chat function. Anything you need, throw it in the chat and we will help you out. So joining me today is TJ Akasanya, e-learning designer and developer for Girtitude LLC. And with all that, TJ, take it away. It is yours.
Okay.
But first of all, while TJ is setting herself up, let's all type in the chat where we're all from. We'd love to know where you are all calling in from today.
Okay.
TJ,
Hello, everyone. Yes, hello everyone. So I'm TJ Akisanya, and I am in e-learning developer and instructional designer, and I freelance under the company name of Reorganizing LLC. And a griot is basically a storyteller in the West African tradition, so I kind of just played on that. And I have over 25 years of professional L&D experience. I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And thank you, Jake, for getting everyone to type in the chat, because this is about the only time I'm going to be able to see the chat. So I really wanted to know who you are and where you're from. And you're from all over the place, from Canada, Virginia, even England.
Alberta.
England. Yeah, Louisiana, South Africa. More from the UK. You know, in the UK, there isn't just one place. There's, you know, there's London and Birmingham and stuff like that. Feel free, guys. North Carolina, Ontario, Canada.
A lot of Torontonians. I'm in Rochester. I'm waving at you from across the lake. It's nice to see you all.
Cool. Oh, thank you, everyone. Puerto Rico, Caribbean. So thanks to everyone who's staying up late at night. And, you know, I really hope you get a lot out of this webinar. Yeah, so I'm going to close the chat and just give me a moment while I start the presentation. Well, share my screen and then start the presentation. Okie doke. So I'll just share my screen and then I will start the presentation. Okay.
Looks good, TJ. We can see it.
Oh, thank you very, very much. All right, okay. So once again, hello, this is me, TJ, worked in L&D for a long time. And you've answered this question already. Thanks very much, everybody. It was nice to get to know you. And I kind of want to get an idea of how to pitch the conversation. So I'm going to ask Jake to put up a poll to find out how much instructional design experience you have. So Jake, thank you.
All right, the results are coming in. I'm going to give you guys another 10 seconds to answer. Cool, almost everybody has responded. 5 more seconds. All righty, so here are the results of the poll. Can you see that, TJ? Can everyone see it?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Yeah, all right, okay, thank you, everyone. So about 50% of you have quite a lot. So you're kind of all over the place. So I'll kind of try to pitch it to meet everyone. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
That's great. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to be showing you 5 steps to converting PowerPoint presentations to interactive story-driven e-learning. The idea really is this comes from my experience. So these are practical steps you can take, you know, not just things you memorize. They should be easy to kind of repeat because I follow the process repeatedly. and kind of refined it over the years to, what's worked for me, but it's adaptable. So what works for me may not necessarily work for you. You can customize it to suit your own work processes and just take what you need. Analysis and design. So for those of you who've been instructional designing for quite some time, there's probably a methodology you follow, like ADDIE or SAM or something like that. If you do follow a methodology, you'll find that everything that I talk about falls into the analysis and design phases. I'm not going to go into the whole instructional design model thing, but this will fall within analysis and design. And as such, we'll never get to the development phase, so you can use any tool to develop after that. Okay, so yeah, so 5 steps that you can adapt, and they should be practical. Right, so I'm going to jump right in and talk about step number 1, which might seem unusual because you've got a PowerPoint presentation, and a lot of times there's an expectation that you can just jump straight in and work from there. But I find it's best to clarify expectations. Okay. And I'll ask you, before I tell you why, I'll ask you to think about it. Particularly those of you who have some experience, why is it necessary to clarify expectations before you start? What have you found in your experience? Why would you need to clarify expectations? Someone's giving you a PowerPoint presentation. Why don't you just jump in right away and start working on it?
Barbara says it saves time. Hoda says for learning objectives, to make sure that everyone is expecting the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't know what they want. Level setting. Stay within the scope of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and you know something, Jake, I actually can see this.
You can.
Yes, I can. But I'll tell you when I can't see the chat. All right. Okay. So I am seeing it. Great. Yep. Cool. Learn objectives. Make sure everyone's expecting the same thing. Absolutely. You don't know what they want. Absolutely. It helps to stay within the scope of the PPT. You are so right. Clarity, the audience criteria for success. Yep, you are absolutely right. Just because you've been given a PowerPoint presentation, it doesn't mean you know everything. And I think with where CJ Moore has said, get a feeling for where everyone is starting from. Absolutely correct. You can't see my chat, so I'm going to move it across. Okay, so yeah, basically it's what you all said. I like to have these questions answered. Is it the right course for the right audience at the right time? And basically, so basically we need to know the expectations before we start. Just because we have a PPT, it doesn't mean that we have everything that we need. So I try to get the expectations before I start in a number of ways, but if you could share what works for you, that would be great. And then afterwards, I'll just summarize how I do it. So what do you do to learn the expectations before you start? Please type in the chat. And once again, I can see it. Hoda says, meeting with stakeholders. Oh, you've been looking at my PPT, Hoda. Meet with the customer. Absolutely, Barbara. Fantastic. Business outcomes desired from leaders. Yep. Conversation with clients from Kim. Alison, Matt, simply ask. Yeah. CJ Moore, pre-questionnaire. Absolutely. Fantastic, everyone. That's great. Again, emphasizing just because you've got a PPT doesn't mean you're ready to go. So how I do it is, like you all said, I start with a kickoff meeting and invite anyone that needs to be there. The stakeholders, subject matter experts, project owner, project manager, depending on your environment, it might vary who you have. If you're really lucky, you'll get access to the subject matter expert. In some cases, you may be the subject matter expert. Okay, then touch bases with the stakeholders, try and find out, basically what they'd like to see. Sometimes you have a project owner and you don't have access to the subject matter experts, SME, subject matter expert. Sometimes you have a project owner, you don't have access to the SME. Make sure you meet with them. If there's project managers involved, make sure you meet with them too, because they're going to be controlling the timeline. And I'm suggesting some questions that you can ask about the course. Who will be reviewing and signing it off? Who are your subject matter experts? How will you measure success? What are the key performance indicators on the job? Is it that you have a reduction in the number of queries, or something like that, or a shorter time to onboard people? What are they basically aiming for? Is this aligned with a broader initiative? What's the desired completion timeline? All of those will help you figure out how you should approach the PowerPoint presentation. Also, some of you mentioned questions about the actual audience. Oh my gosh, you've definitely got to know who it is you're training, what their roles are, what they need to know to be successful on the job. I would say that's the most important thing. What do they need to know to be successful on the job? Because how do you know if the PowerPoint contains it if you don't know that? If there are any accessibility considerations, try and get that up front, okay? A lot of times we tag it on as a technical aspect at the end, but you start designing for accessibility right away, not correcting at the end. Okay. So before we start working on a PowerPoint presentation, converting it to eLearning, we need to make sure that we check and we clarify expectations. So let me ask you this, Jake. Oh, you got it up to the other poll. In your workplace, who do you need to check in with to make sure you're on the right track?
Alrighty, guys, keep the poll open for about 20-25 seconds. Results are coming in. I'll give another 10 seconds here. All right, another 5 seconds. All righty, so here are the results of the poll. About 80% of people participated. There's our results.
All right, okay, so majority of you, stakeholders from other business units, some of you, it's just your manager, a few of you, it's only you. Maybe you're also the subject matter expert, and some of you work with external clients. Thank you very much, everyone. The idea really was just to get you thinking about that. Who do you need to check in with? Just because you have a PowerPoint presentation doesn't mean it's ready to go. Okay. Now, I find that having documentation is still useful. And I've kind of shared a link to this document if you would like to have a copy. I call it like a course outline document, and I'm filling this in while I'm talking to the subject matter expert stakeholders so that I have that. Yeah, sure. And Gabrielle wants to know, will you be sharing the deck after the webinar, Jake?
Yes, yes, we will be.
All right, okay, cool. Okay, so I use documentation for record keeping, and it kind of helps if you have multiple projects you're juggling at the same time. It really does. All right. So now that we've clarified our expectations, we're ready to identify the right stories or scenarios. Okay. So step one, we clarified expectations. Step two, identify the stories or scenarios. I actually suggest doing this, right up front, asking the subject matter expert, or yourself if you're the subject matter expert, if it's your manager you have to go through, put in that request for stories or scenarios. Before having that design meeting with the subject matter expert, I would say don't skip having this meeting with whoever you can. And before you have that meeting, prepare to get them on your side. I find the best way to do that is to familiarize myself with the content. They really, really love it when you know their stuff. Okay. I also like to draft some learning objectives. If they have learning objectives, I review them, because the learning objectives for an instructor-led class are not necessarily the same as the learning objectives for an e-learning module. You measure success in different ways. And the way people practice are different online than in the classroom. Okay, so I like to draft some learning objectives so we can discuss that. And I do some research. If there are some stories that I can try and find on YouTube or anything like that, I'll come in with some. I find it much, much easier to get them to come up with ideas, suggestions, changes to what I've done, than to try to get them to think of something, off the top of their head. Once I have something to start the conversation, then they run through it, and it's difficult to get them going. Yeah, Jeremy agrees. Yay. Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Okay. All right, so do you have any additional tips for preparing for that first design meeting with the subject matter expert or whoever it is you're going to be meeting with? please feel free to type in the chat and share with everyone. I'm not seeing anything coming in the chat.
Need some elevator music or here while we wait.
All right. Someone says, is there a link to documentation? Yeah, there is. Okay, Stephanie tries to get timeline and milestones. Hoda uses brainstorming using a whiteboard. Nancy creates questions. Gabriel has a rough draft. Alison sketches a draft. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Just something to get that conversation going. Stephen provides some mock-ups of design. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. So there's always a little bit more work to do when you get that PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so I have some suggestions for questions to ask. Some questions have been typed in the chat. I mean, Barbara says, come to the meeting with suggestions like FAQs and other tools. Kim, look at previous trainings. So at the design meeting, a key question I find is to ask about if the content's up to date. A lot of times PowerPoints are getting converted because maybe it's been around for a while and they'd like it to be online so it can reach a wider audience. Well, has the audience actually changed? Has any content changed? Is any content actually redundant? Are the learning objectives measurable, specific, actionable, smart learning objectives? What else am I going to say? Sorry. Are there any typical scenarios where the learning might be applied on the job? And what do you think of my ideas? This is the key thing. Are there any typical scenarios where the learning might be applied on the job? Once they get into that conversation, I like to ask them about things that stood out, exceptional cases, and typical things that might actually happen on the job. And this is where you're picking up those stories that you actually need. Sometimes I have to, like I said, type them up and prompt them, but sometimes they go away and they come back with really, really great scenarios. And I think I deliberately chose a subject matter expert here who was out in the field and the job. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that the subject matter expert has another job and you're not their first priority. So that's another reason why. Come prepared, and then they'll start kind of telling you everything you need to know, I find. Okay. So I was going to say, can you type in the chat? Can you think of any additional questions you might ask this to me? Please feel free to do that. If you want to, CJ's sharing about utilizing spreadsheet design layouts, and that's a great idea. So if anyone wants to continue doing that, please feel free to do so. So Jake, it's time for the next poll. If you work with SMEs, how often do you check in with them during the course of design and development process?
All right, results coming in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we've got over half of folks that responded. Thank you. Give it another couple seconds. Got 85 people on the call. That's awesome. All right, 5 more seconds. All righty, here are your results.
Cool, thank you very much. Great, I'm glad that you answered this question. There's only a fraction of you never, but remember there are people on the call who are the only person. Okay, but most of you check in maybe about once a week, some people more than once a week, some people regularly, but less than once a week. The idea though is that you do that checking in. Thank you very, very much. And if you're only checking in once, maybe it's because you're the subject matter expert or they give you a lot of information just straight up. But I've got to admit, I typically tend to check in with them once a week to know that I'm on track. Most of the time, I'm not the subject matter expert. So I'll do that and continue getting that feedback so that I'm doing that continual revision and we don't get a big surprise at the end. And I would say that when I know that I have the right story or scenario, I go through the key KPIs, make sure that they're actually, the process indicators are actually being met. I make sure that I can perform all the activities needed to meet the course objectives. I really love it when it resonates with the SME. They have that aha moment, they start to engage in the conversation. That's the right story or scenario. And someone mentioned earlier, staying within the scope of the course, staying within the scope of the PowerPoint. If the story is within the scope of the actual PowerPoint, you look at the content and it matches up, we know we have the right stories and scenarios. Okay. Definitely. Cool. Thank you. All right, okay. So if you would like to, please share in the chat with others how you know when you found the right scenario or story, what you look for. Please feel free to share. All right, so there's only one of you who doesn't have a SME. Feel free to reach out. Well, if you can, reach out to the audience, the learners. Hopefully, if you're the subject matter expert, you have access to the audience, to the learners or their managers or supervisors, and find out what they need to know to be successful on the job and what sort of situations arise in the job that you can use for stories or scenarios. Thank you. And Catherine says she knows when it resonates with the audience. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and Christina says really struggles with this. She's excited to hear how others achieve this. It's that continual. I find, from my experience, please anybody else answer Christina in the chat. But I find that weekly check-in, when I get that aha moment, I share my ideas. It's about, I think, not being afraid or encouraging them to give you feedback to change your ideas and tweak them. When you get to the point where they're like, oh, they're really, they just don't stop talking, you know it. Okay, yeah, Laura says when you see nodding or laughter or similar cues, it just reminds them of something, you know you've got it. Cool, thank you everyone. Okay, so we've clarified the expectations, we've found a story. Now we're looking at how we actually, how do we start to incorporate it in the PowerPoint itself? I'm going to suggest that you choose an underlying structure. This was a game changer for me. I took a gamification course a few years ago, and it was being introduced to story structures that really changed how I incorporate the story into the course. Now, because there are a couple of ways that you can do it. Okay, you've got these scenarios. You can put out your content, and in between the content, every now and then you can have a scenario, which is great. And I think I was doing that. But what I really want is an immersive experience. The minute someone starts the course, they're in the story and they just keep going through the story. And so when they hit those facts in the content, they don't feel like they're just memorizing facts. So that's the one that I'm aiming for, the green one, the immersive experience. Okay, and the reason I'm doing it is to make the story interesting, make it engaging, make it addictive, like those games you can't put down. And you'll find that basically there'll be variations in the learning experience, adding twists and turns and highs and lows. It seems a little unrealistic, but let's take a look and see how you can actually do that. Okay, so the structure that I like to use, and there are a number of story structures out there. I like one called the hero's journey. Has anyone ever heard of the hero's journey before? Please type in the chat. I'm going off script a little bit. Okay, but if you've heard of it, yes. So no, all right, okay. So basically, I first heard of it again in my gamification class, but also because I'm a fan of Disney's Pixar. It wasn't always Disney's Pixar's studio, absolutely, Lord of the Rings, everything like that. Yeah. So basically, I find that when Pixar put out a movie, it's really addictive. I looked into how they do it, and most of them are based on the hero's journey. The hero gets called to adventure. They have some tests. They meet some mentors and challenges. They have to atone for something, and then they come back and they persevere in the end. It's great, and a lot of Hollywood movies are based on this structure. I really like it. I think and I think I've put a reference at the end of the presentation, but if you type it into Wikipedia, you'll get links to other story structures. If they work better for you, feel free to use it, but I love the hero's journey. And a lot of times learners can't tell I'm using it, which is great. Okay, I like it because the learner is the hero, and I like to kind of motivate learners and make them feel great in the learning activity. So the learning activity is the journey, and the learner is the hero. Cool. Okay, so I just copied this from Wikipedia. The hero's journey involves a hero, goes on an adventure, is victorious in a crisis, comes home changed or transformed. I feel that describes a learning situation. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And I've told you already why it works for me. I love it. It's empowering. It's flexible as well. You're going to find out that it actually has 12 stages. Seems like a lot, but you can use them as you need to. It also provides multiple opportunities for practice. Those 12 stages enable you to show someone something, show them, give them a chance to try it, and you have a chance to also test them. And it can also handle less than perfect situations. A lot of times you hear about training that only ever talks about a perfect case. Well, in the hero's journey, you can put situations in there that might not absolutely work out right, and then they will persevere in the end. Okay, so let's quickly go through the 12 stages. You do not have to memorize them. Okay, but these are actual stages that people go through in the hero's journey. What I'm going to do with you next is we're going to go through I think we're going to go through a little exercise. I chose an example that I hope will resonate with everybody. We've all been to a supermarket, grocery store, or something. Okay, if you live off the grid where you make all your own stuff, please feel free to type it in the chat. I'm going to say that you're probably not on a Zoom call if that was the case. Okay, so customer service training for new cashiers at a supermarket. And if we just say that the objectives are that they follow a standard script to greet the customer as they approach and before they leave, and they ensure that all customers are served promptly and they can handle difficult situations appropriately. Okay, that's it. 3 things that we're going to look at in this exercise. We've got a PowerPoint and we wanted to convert it to e-learning. So I'll give you a moment just to take a look at those objectives, and I'll be putting them on the screen time and time again, and that's what we're going to work with. Okay. Done. Cool. All right. Now I have to move my chat box out the way so I can actually see. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start us off, and then once you get the hang of it, you can start typing in the chat. So if we look at the hero's journey, the ordinary world is just a normal day at the supermarket. We've got a new employee. Her name is Sarah. She's a cashier at the checkout, and she's just having a nice normal day, and it's quiet. It's a quiet day at the supermarket. The call to adventure. There's an old woman approaching Sarah's checkout. She's moving really, really, really slowly. And like I said, it's a quiet day. Refusal of the call. Sarah thinks about it. She sees her friend coming in the door, and she's thinking, well, I want to go say hi to my friend, but there's this customer approaching. Should I wait for the customer, or should I go say hi to my friend? No one's going to notice. Meeting with the mentor. Somebody on another checkout takes a look over at Sarah and reminds her that we need to ensure that all customers are served promptly. Remember, that's one of the learning objectives. Okay, so we've done a few things there. Basically, we've managed to slot in that learning objectives, ensure all customers are served promptly. Okay, so as I go along, joining with your ideas for the next step, the cashier can take in the hero's journey. I'm going to continue. Okay, right. So Sarah's basically trying to decide whether or not she wants to serve the customer. The next step, crossing the threshold. Well, she listens to the mentor and she decides that she's going to serve the customer. This provides the opportunity for learning objective number 1, where we can have her greet the customer as they approach and before they leave, or we can put in kind of knowledge checks. What does she do next? We can provide the information. So we've actually covered 2 learning objectives. So cross the threshold, she serves the customer, tests allies and enemies. Her friend comes into work, and her friend actually comes up and helps her bag the groceries. So she has an ally in this particular situation. Approach to can I answer the call to action? Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. So approach to the cave is just basically you're regrouping, you're ready for the next task. Okay, so she and her friends settle in and they're serving the customer. And then we have an ordeal. And this one is a great opportunity to put in handle difficult situations appropriately. So I have a suggestion for a difficult situation. If anyone can think of a difficult situation, you're a cashier, you're serving an old woman at the checkout, what might throw a curveball in your day? Coupons. Oh yeah, she may have a huge stack of coupons. Stephen says the same thing. Huge stack of coupons, absolutely. She forgot her checkbook, absolutely. Absolutely, she does not have enough money. Yes, all sorts of things can happen. She can't hear very well. She can't remember her PIN. Thank you, everyone. The prices are not keyed in properly. All sorts of things can happen. Things that happen in a supermarket. She forgot items. You are so right. Okay, so we have an opportunity there for Sarah to handle the difficult situation appropriately. And then there's a reward in the hero's journey. We give her a reward. Somebody notices, the customer's happy, the reward, the customer's happy. So then the road back is Sarah feels really, really good about herself. We can recap all the things she did right about this. Customer puts in a good review. Absolutely, the reward. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. You're getting the hang of the story. Cool. Okay, the resurrection and returning with the elixir. These are actually steps that I don't do often unless I want a big recap exercise at the end. Maybe for the resurrection, she'll get a second customer and she'll go through the process without any guidance and she'll handle it okay. Returning with the elixir, basically she completes that second situation successfully. Or maybe the resurrection is the old woman has another problem. She's checking out, she's leaving the checkout, and she starts to feel faint and needs to sit down. What does Sarah do? Does she attend to the old woman? What's the process? You know, how does she respond to this particular situation? Absolutely. And those are basically the final steps in the hero's journey. So that is a way that, you know, so I'll admit to you that what I actually do is I put those steps down in a Word document in a table, and then one side has the steps and the other side has exactly what she's going to be doing to make sure that she's actually traveling that hero's journey. And you can see that it has a cadence to it. It has highs and lows and twists and turns. And in between that, I'm actually structuring the presentation, and I'll talk about that next. So choose a structure that works for you. It does not have to be the hero's journey. I love the hero's journey and it works a lot for Hollywood. It works really, really well. Sells a lot of movies. Maybe you already know a story structure. Do feel free to follow that one. Use a resource. Like I said, I included the webinar link, the Wikipedia link at the end of the presentation. You can follow that to find other story structures. And there are also books on it if you really get into this. But tips for using the hero's journey, if you do decide to use it, customize it. I only choose the steps that I need. I do skip steps. Make sure that you're aligning to your learning objectives, and twists and turns are nice, but a story doesn't always have to be really, really challenging to be compelling, I think, although that's the only way I know how to do them. Okay, so you've got your story. We now know what Sarah's going to be doing. We now need to reorganize our slides into the story. Okay, I can actually slow down a bit. I think I'm a little bit ahead of time, so I'm actually going to pause and do what never got any results when I used to teach in the classroom. But let me just see, has anyone got any comments or questions to check in the chat?
No, it doesn't seem so right now.
All right, okay, cool, we're good. Okay, so that means that everybody is absolutely fine, or either that or everyone's fallen asleep. Cool. Next step, reorganizing the slides into the story. Right, so I have my story. Now, this is key. The first thing I do is I make a backup copy of the original PowerPoint. It's so embarrassing to have to go back and ask for another copy, particularly if someone was hoping to have it off their plate and they never took a backup. Okay, so make a copy first. And then working on the copy, what I do is I create numbered section headings based on the sequence in the story, which is why it was useful to map out the story in a Word document in that table. I give each of them, each section a number, and then I tag the slides that'll go into the different sections. So I've used those like little purple numbers, but I'm hoping that you can see up in the top right hand corner of my slide that I've actually given it a number. I've put the number 7. That's how I tag the slides. The reason that I do that is that when you look at a PowerPoint and it's open in just a single slide view, you're looking at all the slides on the side. You can actually see the ones that have those big purple dots or red dots or whatever on the side. So it makes it much, much easier as I'm reorganizing the slides. So I tag the slides, put a section number, I review the slides, and then I take a look and I see, are any of the slides not labeled? Okay, if any of the slides are not labeled, are they absolutely necessary? Okay. Okay. So I move the slides into their position in the story. So now I'm reorganizing the slides. And what should happen if things are going well is you should be moving sections of slides at the time, because slides that are close together in the sequence should be emphasizing the same part of the story. Okay, the slides on conflict resolution should all be together, that sort of thing. So you're moving them into the sequence so that they flow with the story. Once I've done that, I ask the SME to review the sequence, somebody else reviewing the actual sequence, and I check to make sure that unlabeled slides can actually go before I remove them. Okay, and then I remove the unlabeled slides. But again, remember, I've kept a backup copy of the presentation. So if I need to go and refer to those slides to grab anything later on, I can do that. So I think that image just shows, you know, some slides are labeled, some slides aren't. And it makes it a lot easier to have that conversation with the subject matter expert where you're asking, do we actually really need this? That question is answered by the story. Okay. All right, okay. So then I figured I'd ask you a question. There's another poll. I think this is the final poll, please, Jake. If we think about this situation, the customer service situation, and we have an objective to ensure all customers are served promptly, where should the slides that talk about customer service go in the story structure? So if you read the poll, I've given you 3 options. Should you put them when Sarah is deciding whether to leave the cash register or stay? Oh, I didn't tell you. My crisis was actually that the eggs were cracked. So should you put them when the customer is upset? She has a crisis, you know, maybe maybe she doesn't have the coupons. I said eggs are cracked. Or should you put those slides as the customer is leaving Sarah's cash register? All right. And if you don't really understand the question, please type in the chat and I'll clarify.
Cool. We have a overwhelming choice in the matter, but I'll give another 10 or 15 seconds for people to vote.
Okay.
You're going to run a landslide, I believe is what we call this. All right, 5 more seconds. Alrighty, here are the results.
Oh, thank you, everyone. All right, okay, so most of us have decided that we're going to put the slides to ensure our customers are served promptly at the point where Sarah's deciding whether or not to leave the cash register or to stay. Some of them is like when the customer's upset. I'm going to go with the majority on this one for my story, but remember that your stories are your story. And so you can put it any way you want, but we want to have that immersive experience where things happen in the flow of work. And one of the reasons are that we're creating this immersive experience is to shorten that transition, that learning curve from transferring the knowledge from your computer to the actual job. And if someone has a practical skill or something like that, we want to make sure that we're putting all the information in the right place so they know when to use it. Okay. All right, okay. So we've clarified expectations. We've found the right story. We've chosen a structure. We've reorganized our slides. I'm going to encourage you to create a storyboard before you build. Okay, definitely create a storyboard before you build. And please feel free to say in the chat if you actually also find that useful. I find it useful writing my scripts. I write the script, and before I build anything, I get other people to to take a look. It's so much easier for the subject matter expert or for somebody else to review before you've actually built, and it saves you a lot of time. It means you don't have to kind of redo something. Okay, so it enables me to plan meaningful interactions, interactions that are based around the actual activities that they're performing, as opposed to just memorizing the text. My knowledge checks are within context. Also, it gives me some control over the length of the course, because it is tempting to just start building the course straight from the story, but the story could go on and on and on forever. You know, you write a storyboard, you can see how long it is, and if it's too long, you can start cutting things out or cutting things down. And if necessary, you can design for accessibility. I think having a strong underlying story is so key, particularly when people have visual impairments. So if they can't see what's on the screen, if they miss something or their screen reader misses something, they'll know because the story will be off. It just won't flow properly. So I think having a great story helps making a course more accessible. Okay. All right. So I put up on the screen an example of a meaningful interaction, ensuring customers are served promptly. And I'll just kind of read that out. Okay. As Sarah got up to leave, she noticed an elderly woman slowly approaching her cash register. What should she do? Review the options below, then help Sarah make the right decision. It's so much better than, you know, what are the 5 ways that we do this and this and this, you know, and it's easier, a lot easier to remember. And an example of a contextualized knowledge check, handling difficult situations appropriately. When the customer became upset because their eggs were cracked, what did Sarah do to de-escalate the situation? Check all that apply, which is easier than saying, what are the 5 ways you could de-escalate, you know, and then they'll try to, okay, you know, figure out what they memorized. But within context, it's a lot easier to remember. Okay. So I put a sample of a very, very simple storyboard, and hopefully it shows you how it can help your thought process. And also I've shared a link so you can kind of download that if you want to. And as I said earlier, you share the storyboard with stakeholders and SMEs and encourage them to provide feedback, because if you can get that course correction now, it's a lot easier than correcting it later. So I think I'm doing very, very well for time, actually, Jake. I know you haven't said so, but I've decided.
Absolutely.
Right, cool, thank you. So basically summarizing the 5 steps to converting PowerPoint into story-driven e-learning. First thing you do is clarify expectations, even though you've got a PowerPoint that maybe someone's been using for a while, you never know. You know, clarify expectations so you know you're on the right track right from the beginning. Identify the right story or scenario, make sure you work with the SME. Sometimes you do have to do some research to get those stories and put together something to help get the SME's juices flowing, give them some ideas. Then choose an underlying structure. I love the hero's journey. It's easy. No one actually knows that it's there. They just know that they're having fun and they're engaged. They don't know why. Then reorganize the slides into the story, restructure the slides so that they go into the story flow. Make sure you check with the SME before you remove any redundant slides that you weren't able to organize into the story. Create a storyboard and get people to review and sign off the storyboard. If you can get that sign off before you build, you would have a lot more peace of mind. And then also you can kind of figure out how long it's going to take to build. You can control the size of the e-learning module. Okay, so again, you can download the resources, and I've given you the Wikipedia link, and then hopefully Jake will give you the presentation. And if you want to get in touch with me, if you have any questions or anything like that, then I've also supplied my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me or go to my website and you can book some time to talk to me one-on-one. So thank you. That's my presentation. I think I have enough time for questions and chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
TJ, thank you so much. That was a lovely presentation. And I know I have definitely been in that situation of poor Sarah's multiple times when I worked in retail myself. So definitely relatable. I don't see any standing. We got a lot of hearts, a lot of claps showing up in the and the emojis here. I love that. Great. Does anybody have any questions or anything that we want posed to TJ? Again, we will be sending out the slide deck, a recording of this, so you can all check. Stephanie has the question here. Do you always do scenarios?
Stephanie, yes, I do, because I create solutions for workplace learning. And basically, if there is no scenario in which the content can be used in the workplace, then my question has to be, why are we doing it? Okay, because the learner is going to ask the same question, like, hey, why am I actually doing this? So yes, I do. It helps a lot. Technical, Alison says, technically speaking, do you storyboard solely using PowerPoint or other software? Good question. I usually use Word. I use Microsoft Word. So, not because it's that particular brand, but I actually do that. I find it very easy to lay it out, although it depends. I work with different clients. So sometimes they want their storyboard in, say, PowerPoint, for instance. So it kind of really depends on the process that I'm following, but left to my own devices, I use Word. Barbara, we deal with very technical audience engineers. How do you make the story too corny, not too corny or easy? Interesting, Barbara, because I have an engineering background, so I also deal with a lot of technical content. And I make it not too easy by aligning it with the workplace. I find out about the situations in the workplace, and I focus on real, actual situations. And if I tell the subject matter expert that we don't want it to be too easy, actually, they will tell me, oh, we want it to be a little bit more difficult. I get those particular stories. Yeah. So, and I think also the way that I ask the questions as well, I get them thinking. Sometimes I don't want to give them too many choices or be too leading. So yeah, I get that information from the subject matter expert, to be honest. I ask them about the situations that might be a bit more complex, and they give them to me. I don't know if that answers your question, Barbara. I just know that I tend to make things more difficult, more challenging than easy. So, Christina, what are your thoughts on scenarios for technical IT training? I wonder if that's the same as kind of like Barbara, because I do a lot of technical training. I think it's awesome, particularly if you have simulations where people are actually trying out software, they're typing things in, they're choosing options in software. It really helps to have a story so that the learner can know when to do certain things, within context. I think they work really, really well. It can kind of break up the monotony and help people understand why they're doing the things that they need to do, filling out a form, choosing different options, pulling down different menu options. Laura, can this model be adapted for a personal anecdote story rather than a scenario? Yes, because remember, in Pixar always tell these really, really personal stories, don't they? I think I do like to I like to use that single person going through a situation, or I think I like to use it when it's a safe situation, when the learner is not going to make too many mistakes. Otherwise, I might have like a guide or something like that, or have them watch somebody else or guide somebody else, if, through a situation where things may not always work out. I don't want them to feel too bad. But yeah, I mean, the model can be adapted, because remember, it's not a model that comes from the workplace. It's a model that comes from the movies, which is all about telling stories, isn't it? Laura says similar, thank you. Oh, Laura says thank you. Christina says thank you. All right, thank you. Christina, thank you. One of my issues is do you create a story? Do you prompt the SME? One of my issues is time. Do you create the scenario? Do you prompt the SME to take the lead? I like to do some research and start by creating a scenario before I meet the subject matter expert. And then, as a lot of times they don't have any ideas, or they don't know really where I'm going. So if I kind of lead them by creating something, sometimes they'll just correct my scenario, but often they'll take over from there and they'll say, no, this is the scenario, and they'll start coming up with stories. Sometimes though, I might put out an email and I might ask people who aren't the SMEs to come up with some stories. Can you give me a bank of stories? And then we'll pick from there. And I have the subject matter expert pick from the bank of stories. So the SME is not the only person. The point I'm trying to get at is they're not the only person who can come up with a story. Sometimes the learner can. Somebody who's actually doing the job on a day-to-day basis can come up with a story for you. So there's different ways you can get that story. Do you use choose your own adventure options like Jumanji where there can be different outcomes? Alison, I haven't used it yet, but I've been thinking about it where I'd like to do that. Now, the reason that I haven't used it yet is usually with an e-learning module, I'm trying to get them to learn one thing in that module. And so different adventures might take them down different paths, which might not be appropriate, but sometimes I have been asked to combine things in a module, and then it would have been appropriate to say, choose your own adventure. Which one do you want to do first and make it clear? Okay, Christina, I love that idea. Well, thank you, Christina. I'm glad that it will work for you.
Great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, okay. But remember that if you do want to, if you want to chat with me kind of one-on-one, it's free. You can just kind of book some time on my calendar and we can talk. If you do have questions, I haven't answered them.
Excellent.
Right. How we go.
Any final questions or thoughts for TJ before we all say happy Thursday afternoon to each other? Great. Well, TJ, truly, again, thank you so much. That was a great webinar. Love the story about Sarah. And everybody, thank you for joining us. We offer a lot of tools to create scenario-driven games and stuff like that here through ELB, so check it out. TJ, one more time, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and be on the lookout for a recording, slides, and all that good information. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.